Hello everyone, my name is Nanditha Gopi. I'm a postgraduate student in counseling, and today I will be presenting to you my research titled Simple Acts, Profound Changes: Gratitude and Kindness Practices on Self-Esteem and Life Satisfaction. Now, it is going to be a pretty long presentation, so I will try my best to keep you engaged. I followed a pretty basic structure of a research paper. So we have introduction, method section, results, and discussion. I think it might help for us to just go over the terms mentioned in the title to familiarize ourselves with the definitions. So, first we have gratitude journaling. In this, individuals practice record keeping aspects of their lives that they are thankful for. In doing so, they're able to redirect their attention away from negative preoccupations, thus leading to better emotional states. There is, of course, solid evidence of the impact, as stated in the mentioned study here, where they found that weekly gratitude journaling did, in fact, show an increase in life satisfaction and optimism. Next, we have acts of kindness. So, this involves performing pro social behaviors that translate our inner positive states. Now, the mechanism behind this is a term that's probably familiar to most, which is help us high. It is the boost in mood or emotional state, which is associated with greater social connectedness. Next, we have self esteem. It is an individual's overall evaluation of their personal worth. So, an individual with high self esteem probably has greater emotional resilience and adaptive coping. Finally, we have life satisfaction, which is an individual's overall cognitive evaluation of their quality of life. So, higher life satisfaction means lower mortality risks and also improved physical health. Now that we've familiarized ourselves with the terms, I think we're good to move on to understanding the rationale of the study. The main idea for the study comes from the blind spot that we identified, the research gap. If you noticed in the previously mentioned studies, whether it's the analysis by Curry or the study by Emmons and McCullough, they are pretty focused on just one of the interventions. The reason being they typically exclude combined interventions due to methodological heterogeneity. And primary studies as well assign these practices to separate conditions. Yet in real life, you'll notice people naturally blend these practices. So, for example, when someone journals about their day, often they'll write about the kindnesses they received or performed. So, this brings about the question as to what if gratitude and kindness aren't just additive, but actually synergetic? Now, this hypothetical is sourced from the highlighted theoretical foundations here. We will talk about that just now. Yeah. So, humanistic psychology talks about a term called congruence. What this means is the alignment between our internal values and our external behaviors. Another theory on the same line is the self determination theory, which suggests that our well being is enhanced when we engage in behaviors consistent with our intrinsic motivation. So, in this context, gratitude journaling is the internal aspect, and acts of kindness would be the external aspect. I hope you're able to get a vague idea as to where this is going. So that brings us to the aim of the study. The aim of the project was to investigate whether integrating gratitude journaling with daily acts of kindness would lead to measurable improvements in stated variables, which is self esteem and life satisfaction. The hypotheses were straightforward, as mentioned over here. So the next question is, how did we carry out this study? And the method section will help us understand that. So we were able to identify with the help of G power analysis that we required a minimum of 34 participants to be able to evaluate the effectiveness of the study. So we recruited participants via Sona and media platforms such as WhatsApp and Instagram. We used pre-post design, and for measures, pretty simple measures with proven reliability and validity. So Rosenberg for self-esteem and satisfaction with life scale for life satisfaction. The analysis employed was paired samples t-test. The procedure was pretty simple. So, week zero, participants completed both the questionnaires along with their requested demographics. And week one to three, that is for 3 consecutive weeks, they were encouraged to perform daily gratitude journaling along with at least one act of kindness during the week. So, by the end of the third week, they were given the same measures to fill out along with reflective questions about their experience. The data was collected via SciToolkit. We did this to reduce researcher bias. We had our weekly meetings with our supervisor for updates. All of this covers up for the quality control aspect. Ethics. The study did get approved by the University Ethics Committee. There was informed consent involved along with the right to withdraw. We made sure that there was complete anonymity with the use of unique codes rather than any personal identifiers. So we made sure to separate the email addresses from the response data. From the method section, we were able to get an idea as to how the data was collected. Now, what does that collected data look like? We will see that from the results section. And yes, both the hypotheses were supported. The variables did show statistical significance. So first, let's take a look at self-esteem. As you can see here, there is a mean improvement from 12.94 to 15.74. So that's a 2.80 point improvement. It was highly significant with p-value less than 0.001, and the 95% confidence interval excludes 0 entirely. The bars in this graph represent the pre-test scores, and the line graph represent the post-test scores. So percentage of increase for the overall variable was approximately by 26%. So there was a substantial shift with medium effect size on the scale. One thing to notice here is the difference in the gains as well as the presence of reductions. So some participants showed pronounced gains over 9 points, and you can notice participants 26 and 35 here, for example, they've showed reductions of 3 to 6 points. Next is life satisfaction. The mean scores increased from 18.77 to 22.94, which is a 4.17 point improvement. Again, high significance. But unlike self-esteem, what we noticed here was that there was reduced variability post-intervention for this measure. This means that participants converge towards more consistent levels of life satisfaction. This is the table for life satisfaction. We can see an improvement by 22%. So nice numbers, but what do they mean? We will be discussing that in this section. I think first it is important to kind of acknowledge the patterns and the variations that we noticed while analyzing the results. So, yes, first we have response convergence. Participants with initially low scores improved notably, while those with high baseline scores showed modest declines. So both groups ended up converging towards the mean. Now, this is a statistical phenomenon wherein extreme scores naturally shift towards average values. It is usually prevalent in repeated measures called as regression to the mean. So that was one pattern that we noticed. The other one is differential self-esteem responses. This suggests the possible influence of conditional processes. So if we look at it through the lens of self-determination theory, we can see that for individuals whose pro-social behavior is typically intrinsically motivated, this structured approach that these questionnaires give may have potentially hindered that perceived authenticity. And from a Rogerian perspective, we can see that an externally imposed structure may have created a temporary incongruence with their own self-concept. This could have resulted in, the possible difficulty with immediate integration. So, individual motivation and how the intervention is personally experienced are definitely two key factors in shaping results. Finally, we have prior experience as moderator. One of the participants reported saying that I was already keeping a gratitude journal. This particular participant showed slight declines in both the variables, so self esteem 13 to 12 and life satisfaction from 22 to 21. We can understand this pattern with the help of the concept of habituation. So, when there is repeated exposure to the same activity, it reduces its psychological effect over time. So, participants with no prior experience likely benefited more from this activity. Okay, so statistically, we just discussed, the patterns observed. Now we look at the possible themes that we've identified through analysis. Now, these three themes will also give us a reason for the possible cause of improvement in the scores. So, first, we have enhanced self regard. Through repeated engagement in gratitude journaling, participants appear to have internalized more positive interpretations of their experiences, which in turn could have possibly strengthened their sense of self worth. Now, this shift was reflected in participants through comments such as, in this gratitude journaling process, I feel like my emotion towards myself is much better than before. So acts of kindness appears to have also complemented this process by providing that behavioral confirmation of one's values to others. Now, what this reflects is a bottom-up pathway where there is improved self-regard, which in turn improves, positive interpretation of our life circumstances, which in turn enhances our life satisfaction. Okay. Next, we look at behavioral activation. So, what is behavioral activation? It is a structured approach designed to increase participation in rewarding activities. Now, the focus here is to counteract avoidance or low mood. Plus, it also gives us this useful framework for understanding this effect. Especially in case of the tracking component of gratitude journaling, it seems to have increased the frequency of kind behavior by shifting it from an occasional behavior to a deliberate practice. So, in this context, that monitoring aspect likely heightened awareness for opportunities of kindness. So, participants were actively able to notice them and act on them. I will now read out a comment by a participant that reflects exactly what we just discussed. I consider myself a kind person, but the act of recording it daily absolutely made me more vigilant to how and where I could show kindness. Next, we move to effective grounding and emotional stability. The intervention produced qualitative emotional shifts, so participants described feeling softer and more grounded after regularly engaging in these practices. Now, from a Rogerian perspective, these changes can be understood as increased congruence. So, what this means is participants likely experienced closer alignment between their internal feelings and outward behavior. So, what happens when this alignment happens is they feel more psychologically safe, therefore less defensive or less likely to suppress their emotions. Um, we can see this particular process, that is this grounding and stability process, acting as a key integrating force linking self-regard and behavioral activation. So, in conclusion, this suggests a synergetic model of change in which there is emotional aspect, there is cognitive, there is behavioral processes involved, but somehow they seem to interact dynamically. Next, we will be looking at the theoretical contribution from the study. First, we have synergy matters more than volume. From previous studies, we are able to say that gratitude interventions alone have produced inconsistent results when compared to their active controls, partly due to demand characteristics and placebo effects. So, the central contribution here is demonstrating that combining the cognitive aspect and behavioral strategies actually creates a sort of synergy. Now, how is the synergy created? Through a reinforcing loop where internal reflection and external action strengthen each other. But this isn't about, doing more positive activities, but about the strategic alignment between complementary practices. What we are to understand here is that conceptual coherence matters more than volume. Next is self-esteem malleability. So this addresses kind of like the ongoing theoretical debate as to viewing self-esteem as a stable trait. Through our study, we have now recognized it as responsive to context, and our findings support this newer view by demonstrating that brief targeted interventions can produce meaningful and persistent self-esteem improvements. You don't need intensive or long-term programs to generate such results. Next is the three pathways. It is nothing but what we've discussed in the three identified underlying mechanisms. So, first we have the cognitive pathway through gratitude journaling. Next is the behavioral pathway through acts of kindness. And thirdly, affective pathway formed through combining the practices, resulting in positive emotional experiences. Practical implications, the concepts that can be of good use, especially for people in counseling and related fields. So, first we have habit formation. A participant reported saying, I think it will be a habit that I will continue for the foreseeable future. Now, this suggests that the 3 week duration may be sufficient to initiate habitual responses. Um, the next one is a multi-setting application. So, workplace well-being programs could utilize these interventions to incorporate brief daily practices. Also, in case of educational settings, they might include them in social emotional learning, as well as in community mental health organizations. They could use them as low-intensity additions to pre-existing treatments. The important point is obviously the scalability advantage. So, these interventions are low cost, low resource, and brief, so the scalability is very much possible. Next. Okay. Now we move to the limitations and future directions. So, I believe being transparent and honest about the process and the limitations that it comes with only increase the credibility of a study. Plus, the study served as almost like an initial step to examine whether our proposed theoretical concept would actually translate into practical results. So, as a result, the limitations mainly highlight areas of future research now that the hypothesis has been supported. Keeping that in mind, the first limitation is obviously no control group. We can't rule out placebo effects or a regression to the mean or demand characteristics, things that we did discuss in the discussion. So, future research could incorporate a randomized control trial to establish causality more firmly. Next is the cultural context. This was a purely UK based sample, and as we're aware, gratitude practices may vary in effectiveness across cultures. So, it would be good to kind of investigate into how these interventions may be meaningfully adapted for diverse cultural groups. Next is demographic analysis. So we did collect demographic data, but we didn't systematically incorporate them into the analysis. So future work could benefit from examining whether or how individual differences moderate effects. Like I said, these limitations don't negate the findings, but what they do is they clarify the boundaries as to what we can claim and obviously point towards the valuable next steps. So, key takeaway. This study definitely highlights that some of the most powerful interventions are also the simplest. Even if the numbers alone do not tell us the full story, I'm pretty sure you would have gotten an idea of the impact just from the participant comments that I read out during the presentation. So, you can confidently offer these practices for your clients. It is simple, it is evidence based, and importantly, impactful. So, simple acts do create profound changes. It is not because of all of these complex concepts that are behind them, but purely because they align who we are with what we do. So I have attached some important references here. Please do have a look. And if you have any doubts or simply want to share your insights on this topic, feel free to reach out via the mentioned mail ID. Thank you so much.